Report 1. My name is Andrew Collins. I'm 27 years old, an amateur photographer, and I've always had a nearly unhealthy fascination with places forgotten by time, where dust and silence seem to guard secrets no one dares to tell. On the night of October 14th, 1998, I decided to explore an abandoned sanatorium on the outskirts of Louisville, a place infamous among locals for its history of tragedy and dark tales connected to the treatment of tuberculosis in the 1920s and 1930s. Closed since the 1960s, the building was nothing more than a carcass overgrown with moss, its shattered windows and endless corridors like open wounds in the concrete. I carried with me my old Nikon camera, 2 flashlights, and a notebook. I entered alone, a little after 10 p.m., under the pale glow of a moon that seemed far too weak to light the path toward that sleeping monster. Inside, the air hung heavy like lead, thick with the acidic smell of mold, rust, and something strangely medicinal that clung to my nostrils. Every step I took echoed through the main hall, where broken chairs and rusted stretchers lay scattered like the bones of a cruel past. I climbed up to the 3rd floor, drawn by the rumors that it had once been the children's ward, where the sick spent their final days. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with half-open doors that revealed rooms swallowed by darkness. I adjusted the lens of my camera, capturing the peeling paint on the walls while lighting the scene with my flashlight. That's when I heard it, a faint sobbing, low and muffled, as if a child were weeping just a few feet away. I froze, my heartbeat racing. It's just the wind, I told myself, but quickly realized all the windows were boarded shut. There was no draft in that place. I forced myself to move forward, ignoring the sound, but it followed me, shifting as though something unseen circled around, watching. I lifted the camera, snapping quick shots, when suddenly the flashlight began to flicker before dying completely. Darkness swallowed everything, and I became aware of a new noise, a low hum, almost like breathing, right beside me. Then came the touch that froze my blood. A small hand, cold as ice, brushed against the back of my neck. It wasn't accidental. Thin fingers pressed firmly against my skin, sliding slowly before vanishing. I spun around in panic, grabbing my spare flashlight, but its weak beam only revealed the empty corridor stretching out in silence. "You shouldn't be here," whispered a voice, rough and jagged, so close I could feel its cold breath against my ear. It didn't sound like a child, nor fully like an adult. It was something caught in between, distorted, like a radio tuned halfway between stations. Instinct took over. I slung the backpack onto my shoulder and bolted toward the staircase at the far end of the hall. Yet with every step, the stairs seemed to multiply beneath my feet, twisting as though the building itself was trying to trap me inside. I dared to glance back only once, and in the corner of my eye I saw it, a small shadow sliding along the wall, its form flickering like a dying flame. When I finally burst onto the ground floor, breathless and trembling, I ran without looking back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, parked several blocks away, where I locked the doors and sat frozen, staring into the night, waiting for something to emerge from the darkness. Nothing came. Days later, when I developed the photographs, I found something that haunts me to this day. In the center of one picture from the 3rd floor stood a pale, blurred figure, the silhouette of a child in a nightgown, positioned exactly where I remembered being alone. I know no one else was there. I destroyed the photo, but the image never left me. It still visits my nightmares, with hollow eyes and a crooked smile that could never belong to anything human. Report 2. My name is Junhyuk Lee, and in the spring of 2005, I was just a 22-year-old film student, obsessed with documentaries and the idea of capturing raw reality through a lens. Accompanying me were 2 essential people, my classmate Hae-jin and our friend and technician, Dong-woo. We decided to film an experimental project inside an old psychiatric hospital abandoned since the mid-1990s, a place locals avoided and whispered about in disturbing legends. Rumor had it that the patients had never truly left its walls. Isolated in the rural expanse of Gyeonggi-do, the building loomed like a concrete ghost, its shattered windows and air of decay absorbing even the last light of the day. We entered around 6 p.m. on March 22nd, carrying cameras, microphones, and flashlights, nervously laughing to mask the fear inspired by the rusted signs warning of the cursed location. The moment we stepped inside, the smell hit us like a punch: mold, dust, and a metallic tang reminiscent of old blood. The lobby was littered with debris, tipped over wheelchairs, stacks of torn papers, and walls stained with grotesque patterns that seemed to form distorted faces in the dim light. Dongwoo made jokes to ease the tension, but Haijin was visibly frightened, her hands trembling as she clutched the microphone. We decided to head down to the basement, home to the room the locals feared most, the old electroshock chamber, rumored to be the epicenter of the hospital's darkest stories. The concrete steps were damp and creaked under our weight, as if the building itself were warning us to turn back. In the basement, the atmosphere became suffocating, thick as though we were breathing through a soaked cloth. The electroshock room was small and oppressive, with a rusted metal table at its center and wires hanging from the ceiling like cobwebs. As we adjusted the camera, I noticed something strange in the headphones. The directional microphone started picking up muffled laughter, as if a group of people were hiding somewhere just out of sight. I looked at my friends. Both wore the same confused, frightened expression. We knew we were alone. "Echo," I murmured, my voice trembling. I kept recording, rotating the microphone in every direction, but the laughter didn't come from one place. It surrounded us, sometimes distant, sometimes so close it felt lodged inside my mind. Suddenly, a metal door at the back of the room slammed with tremendous force, reverberating like trapped thunder. We all jumped, and Haijin dropped the microphone, amplifying the sound in my headphones. I ran to the door, but it was locked, coated in rust, untouched for decades. No drafts, no windows, nothing could explain the impact. Dongwoo tried to regain composure and suggested we leave, but Haijin remained frozen, staring into the void as if something were right in front of her. Before we could react, her body collapsed to the floor, powerless. Panic set in. We tried to revive her while the air grew heavier, oppressive like lead, and the sensation of being watched intensified. When Haijin finally regained consciousness, she was pale, trembling uncontrollably. Rolling up her sleeve to check her pulse, we discovered 3 deep scratches on her arm, fresh marks as if invisible claws had torn her skin. She insisted she hadn't hurt herself, and nothing in the room could have caused those wounds. Without hesitation, we grabbed our equipment and bolted toward the exit, feeling invisible eyes glued to our backs with every step. That night, at home, we reviewed the footage. The laughter was still there, but now accompanied by something far worse. A clear, low, cold voice that came from nowhere, whispering only 2 words: "Stay here." None of us had spoken them. The camera had also captured a presence our eyes never saw. A tall, vaguely human shadow standing at the entrance to the electroshock room. I never set foot in that hospital again. A few days later, Haijin burned the tape, saying she couldn't bear to hear that voice again. Even now, just remembering it feels as though it's still with me. Report 3. My name is Antonio Mendez, and in 1987, 34 years old, I was working as a night watchman at an old abandoned sanatorium on the outskirts of Araxá, Minas Gerais. A building that decades earlier had housed hundreds of tuberculosis patients. Closed since the 1970s, the place was a concrete skeleton, overrun with mold, broken glass, and a silence so deep it seemed to devour every sound. I had accepted the job just 2 weeks prior, drawn by the steady pay and the promise of quiet nights. The stories about the sanatorium being haunted didn't faze me. I grew up in a small town and always assumed they were just rumors meant to scare those unfamiliar with the place. But on the early morning of November 9th, I discovered that some legends are born from truth. It was just past 2 a.m. when I began my rounds. The dark hallways stretched endlessly, lit only by my flashlight and the flickering glow of an old generator. The air was thick, smelling of dampness mixed with chemical traces, as if the walls still held remnants of long-abandoned medicines. As I walked down the main wing, a sound made me freeze immediately. Slow, rhythmic pounding, like someone hammering nails with deliberate patience. It came from the second floor where the old tuberculosis ward had been. I thought it might be an intruder. Vandals occasionally broke in to steal copper wiring or vandalize the property. I tightened my grip on my nightstick and climbed the stairs, trying to steady my racing heartbeat. When I reached the ward, the sound stopped, as if waiting for me to arrive. The corridor was empty, with rusted beds lined along the walls and a thick layer of dust that showed every footprint I left behind. I swept the flashlight across the corners, but there was nothing. The silence seemed to pulse along with my own heartbeat. I checked the rooms one by one, all empty except for broken furniture and tattered curtains that moved slightly, though no wind stirred. Then I passed a cracked mirror, hanging crookedly on the wall, and my life changed forever. In the reflection, I saw her clearly. A woman stood behind me, wearing a worn white nightgown, black hair falling across her face. Her skin was so pale, it seemed to dissolve into the darkness, and she remained perfectly still, just a few steps away. My stomach twisted, and I spun around, flashlight raised, but the corridor was empty. My body froze. When I glanced back at the mirror, she was still there, now closer, her head tilted as if observing me with morbid curiosity. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the flashlight. "Who's there?" I shouted, but the only reply was the echo of my own voice. At that moment, the air shifted. A strong smell of ether filled the corridor, sharp and nauseating, stinging my nostrils. Before I could react, a muffled scream pierced the silence. Not loud, but deep, as if coming from inside the walls, trapped within the concrete. It was a plea for escape, a lament that seemed to pass through the stone and strike directly at my chest. The chill was so intense that my legs buckled. I didn't wait to see more. I dropped the nightstick and ran through the corridors, tripping on the stairs, sensing a presence behind me I didn't dare face. When I finally reached the outer courtyard, the cold night air filled my lungs, but the feeling of being followed didn't fade. I sprinted to the security post, locked the door, and spent the rest of my shift sitting, staring at the sanatorium's entrance, afraid the woman in the mirror might appear at any moment. Nothing did, yet the silence was so oppressive it seemed to mock me. The next morning, I handed in my uniform and quit, giving no explanations. I never shared this story with my coworkers, not wanting to be labeled crazy. Even today, when I close my eyes, I smell the ether and see, reflected